Today I'm going to be reviewing the Palmer versus Merluzzi case. The citation for this case is Palmer versus Merluzzi, 689 Federal Supplement 400, District of New Jersey, 1988. So we're first going to start with the facts. So in 1988, Palmer was a high school varsity football player who received a 10-day school suspension due to use of drugs and alcohol in the high school radio station where he worked. The school's handbook stated that any student that has alcohol or drug consumption would result in a 10-day suspension from the school. The school's athletic program had a policy that stated students who participated in school athletics were limited to students who demonstrated good school citizenship. Palmer eventually admitted to his actions to the administration and was suspended for the 10 days, but then was also given an additional 60-day suspension from athletics by the principal, Merluzzi. Palmer appealed to the State Commissioner of Education. An administrative law judge held a hearing and determined the subsequent athletic suspension required additional due process protections. The Commissioner of Education then overturned the administrator law's judge's decision on appeal and determined Palmer had received sufficient due process for both school and athletic suspensions. Palmer sued the superintendent and Board of Education in a federal court district, claiming that he was deprived of the opportunity to play football without due process. The district court concurred that the process afforded Palmer for both suspensions was sufficient, and Palmer then appealed to the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. So the main issue that was in dispute in this case revolved around the due process rights under the 14th Amendment, revolving around his involvement with extracurricular activities. And the 14th Amendment states, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." Another issue in regards to Palmer's was the Equal Rights Act. So Palmer stated that no other student had ever received a penalty or of equal magnitude for the offense that was in question. Equal protection rights are a constitutional right to equal protection and bars the government from passing laws to taking official actions that treat similarly situated people or groups of people differently. So the decisions and holdings that the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit ruled in favor of the school district with the following points. The first was that the court held that the due process rights of students in terms of suspensions from school and extracurricular activities differ from one thing to the other. Students are entitled to due process protections for suspensions from school, but the due process protections are not as extensive for extracurricular activities, such as his football team involvement. The court also distinguished the difference between the two suspensions and concluded that suspending Palmer from extracurricular activities did not require the same level of due process as a suspension from school. In regards to Palmer's equal protection claim, the court concluded that Palmer's suspension was rationally related to enforcing the legitimate goal of ensuring compliance with school drug policy, and that even severe penalties on student extracurricular participation do not violate principles of equal protection where the penalties are legitimate to school goals and not discriminatory in nature. And lastly, Palmer said that the suspensions were arbitrary, and the court found that while the penalty was severe, it reflected an approach to dealing with a complex social problem that is not irrational. So Palmer's argument that the defendant's conduct was arbitrary is without merit. There were some separate opinions in regards to this court case, one being Judge Hutchinson, and he said that he had really two main points. The first being that there should be stricter due process requirements, especially in regards to these lengthier suspensions in extracurricular activities. He also stated that the impact of the 60-day suspension impacted an important aspect of the educational experience. And by implementing this lengthy suspension, he was being withheld from the educational experience, and there should be a more involved and formal procedural protections around this case. but overall, the dissent argued for a higher standard of procedural fairness in suspensions, especially when affecting a student's educational experience beyond just school attendance. So Palmer versus Merluzzi highlights many key areas in regards to disciplinary action at school. The first point surrounds due process procedures at schools. This case shows that there are varying degrees of due process based on, one, the nature of the case, and also involving extracurricular activities versus the school itself. This case also sets the standard for how schools balance discipline when it comes to extracurricular activities and the boundaries that schools have in these decisions. This case shows us the different levels of due process that are required for different school functions and events. Overall, I think this case involves something that is very familiar in our schools of how do we balance discipline across all aspects of the school, including the extracurricular activities that our students are involved in and that are part of our school communities. The court's decision reflects how schools should follow the student code of conduct as long as those policies are related to educational goals. This case also highlights how in schools today, it's important to make distinctions with disciplinary actions when it comes to school and those extracurricular activities, as well as maintaining correct due process procedures for students. It also reminds schools to ensure students are receiving the correct amount of due process when it comes to suspensions, and that students and families are provided with correct evidence. They're provided with explanations of the suspension, and they also give the students and families the opportunity to share their side to the situation. I think administrators of schools should be confident in their decision making, but also make sure that they have the correct documentation completed and the procedures are clear and they're fair for students. I think we need to be able to communicate it to our students in a way for them to understand, and so they understand the full process of what's happening. And lastly, as a proactive measure, this court case provides schools with a reminder to maintain respect and safety surrounding students' rights, especially during disciplinary actions. There should be a balanced approach between the disciplinary measures that are in place while also cultivating restorative practices to help grow the student to be an independent thinker and an overall good citizen.